Welcome to our channel by Gulab Sir for Wisdom Coaching Center. As a part of series of topic, today's topic is Oogenesis. This entire process of Oogenesis is occur in following steps. So here the process of Oogenesis. It is the process of formation of ovum. Now to understand oogenesis in detail, that we have to have knowledge of this diagram, that when we have the section of this ovary, this is a section of ovary, it is supplied with blood vessels, it is supplied with blood vessels, arteries and veins, so as to have complete circulation of blood to the ovary, as well as these ovaries are attached with abdomen through the ligament. They are attached with through the ligament. Now internally these ovary are lined by germinal epithelial cells, which already in the puberty, in the mother body itself, before taking birth, these Oogonian mother cells, around 2 millions of Oogonia are produced inside the ovary of the female fetus during that embryogenesis itself. Now these are Oogonia, around 2 millions of Oogonia. They are produced and present inside each ovary during the embryogenesis, that is what embryo development of female fetus in mother body. Now these Oogonia, they just enlarge in size so that get ready for meiotic division and arrested in prophase stage. That means, for example, one of the cell, this that enlarge in size and has prominent nucleus with dense cytoplasm, and enlarge inside, this become a primary oocyte and has granulosa cells all around it. These are the granulosa cells that they form layer around. This is what called primary follicle. So I label it as a primary follicle. So this is a primary follicle. Now these primary follicles are arrested in prophase. That first meiosis begin, but arrested in prophase. To have the better understanding, we can have simultaneous explanation of this process of oogenesis. So here this is enlarged size with prominent nucleus and cytoplasm, which undergo meiosis 1. This undergo meiosis 1, that is oogenesis begin, arrested in prophase stage. Again can be drawn, arrested in prophase stage. That what, same number of chromosome, 46 chromosome arrested in prophase stage. So I can write here, mention here, that in which stage do it arrested. So here this is arrested in prophase stage before the birth. This remain in arrested stage. Now millions of that primary follicles which are produced in each ovary before birth, they are arrested in prophase stage. So female fetus take the birth with this primary follicle. With this primary follicle, this is very important to understand. These are the primary follicle arrested in prophase stage before birth. So I draw a line here that this condition is before birth of the female child. Before birth of female child, that is the embryo stage. Now when that take the birth, now after birth, which remain that primary follicles, now that they are continue to be as it is up to puberty. Before ovulation, first menstruation, that what becomes secondary follicle. That means nucleus with primary oocyte itself having This is primary oocyte, but here it becomes secondary follicle. So by diagram, if we have to show, we can show here this becomes a secondary follicle with these two granulosa layer, cells of granulosa. Here it get covered by two layers of granulosa cells. Hence it is what arrested in prophase 1 with prominent nucleus. This is secondary follicle. This was primary follicle. Now this is secondary follicle. So here this is secondary follicle after birth. Birth has taken and secondary follicle is now ready to have first meiosis. But in ovary itself, that this undergo development by the hormone of follicle stimulating hormone, that follicle stimulating hormone stimulate this follicular cell to produce the estrogen, and this development is begin on the first day, no doubt, every cycle when it continue to have. Now very important to note that this is a primary oocyte. This primary oocyte arrested in prophase stage. These are the primary follicles. Now these are the secondary follicles with two layer. We can draw and show it so that this will be best to have the better understanding. Here, suppose there are two layers of granulosa cells. Therefore, it become a secondary follicles. So all the follicles, primary follicles, become secondary follicles. Now when they take the birth and during puberty, this is a puberty period, most of them they get degenerated, and now only 80,000, 60 to 80,000, 60,000 to 80,000 folliculi, secondary follicles, that they remain alive. Now in ovary, this secondary follicle change into tertiary follicles, to tertiary follicle nucleus, this tertiary follicle with granulosa cell around it, then two layers of granulosa, that theca interna and theca externa are produced. These are suppose granulosa cells, and here very important to fluid filled cavity appear. Here this is a fluid filled cavity called antrum, antrum, with theca interna and externa. So here these are the layers all around that antrum, and here this is a secondary oocyte, primary oocyte, which undergo meiosis 1 and produce first polar body. This first polar body is non-functional when the meiosis 1 is completed inside the ovary itself. So meiosis 1 is completed in ovary itself. So first polar body is produced. It is non-functional, but on 14th day of that cycle, the secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase stage, with zona pellucida around it and corona radiata, that are the cells which are present all around it. These are the cells which hold together by hyaluronic acid. These cells held together around zona pellucida. So this process of release of this secondary oocyte is called ovulation. This process of release of secondary oocyte is called ovulation, it occur on 14th day. But how it happened? This first meiosis occur, first polar body is produced, and this oocyte, secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase stage is released off with zona pellucida around it, and a corona radiata layer. This is secondary oocyte which release on 14th day, arrested in metaphase stage. Secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase stage, that is incomplete development, and that release off from the ovary on 14th day. This remaining cells of that tertiary follicle, this is a tertiary follicle. It's very important to know this is a tertiary follicle. Now this tertiary follicle get break under the influence of luteinizing hormone. So luteinizing hormone which released on 14th day, that is called luteal surge, developed Graafian follicle, developed Graafian follicle, that is tertiary follicle, to produce first polar body. This is first polar body, and secondary oocyte that arrested in metaphase stage. So see simultaneously how it happened. This is what first meiosis completed. When second meiosis begins, it initiate that second meiosis or first meiosis which arrested in metaphase stage, when sperm enter count this corona radiata and zona pellucida and get into the nucleus of this secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase stage. Immediately the second meiosis which arrested in metaphase is completed, second polar body produced and ovum produced. That ovum is called oocyte. Second polar body is released out from the site where from here that sperm nucleus enter into, called animal pole. To understand this, now see this secondary oocyte is ready to have the encounter by the sperm. When sperm encounters, this is a suppose acrosome, this is a nucleus with 23 chromosome, this is a middle piece, and again this is a tail. Now which part that enter? This only this acrosome that release sperm lysine hyaluronidase to dissolve the hyaluronic acid which hold this corona radiata and encounter the sperm through, so that when nucleus enter through animal pole, that second meiosis is completed and second polar body is produced. This is a second polar body with scanty cytoplasm, so it can be a second polar body. When it produces when there is a fertilization, but these processes depend upon when the fertilization occur. Otherwise, till that this real ovum is not produced here. That real ovum, unless and until encounter happen, real ovum we call oocyte is not produced. So oogenesis is never completed unless and until sperm encounter the secondary oocyte, because that secondary oocyte remain arrested in metaphase stage, and that is what ovulation we call is released of every month, and that period is called menstruation cycle. That on every 14th day ovum is not released, that secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase is released. Now it is ready to get fertilized if sperm receives. When sperm encounter, then second polar body and real oocyte ovum produce to have the fertilization from the zygote. So where do first polar body produce? In ovary. Where do this second polar body produce? In fallopian tube, isthmus. So second polar body, this fertilization occur in isthmus. of the fallopian tube. That is called ampullary isthmus junction when sperm encounter. So once again, to have understanding to the oogenesis process, that what millions of spermatogonia produce in female fetus during embryogenesis mother body. By the time they get undergo oogenesis, that meiosis, so from the primary spermatocyte or primary oocyte with that arrested in prophase stage. So this, when they take birth, during that primary oocyte covered by these granulosa cells from primary follicles, and that primary follicles during puberty begin to degenerate. So lakhs of most of the primary follicles get degenerated. Only 60 to 80,000 primary follicles are remain inside the ovary. When the first menstruation begins, that primary follicle becomes secondary follicle, become tertiary follicle, that is called developed Graafian follicle. So by the time in tertiary follicle, that primary oocyte undergo meiosis 1 and produce first polar body, and secondary oocyte is not completely developed but it arrested in metaphase stage, get released off on 14th day with the action of luteinizing hormone. That secondary oocyte, when it released out, it remain inside the fallopian tube till the sperm come and encounter and form the second polar body and real ovum to have the zygote. I hope you did understand this process of oogenesis. To have the correct and clear understanding, repeatedly you see this video because it's somewhat complicated to explain together. When menstruation cycle is going on ovary, at the time this oogenesis process is going on. But here I did try to explain you together to have the best understanding, that is conceptual understanding, exactly where the process of oogenesis occur and what is it. So entire process is controlled by hormone. Follicle stimulating hormones stimulate follicle cell to produce estrogen, which required for the development of uterus wall, so as to prepare uterus for anticipated pregnancy, as well as this luteinizing hormone on 14th day break the developed Graafian follicle to produce the secondary oocyte and release it to get into the fallopian tube to have the encounter or fertilization with sperm and produce the zygote and second polar body. So in NEET question can ask, first polar body is produced when and where, second produced when and where, in which condition do the female fetus take birth, in which condition of this oogenesis or stage of oogenesis female fetus take birth, as well as in which condition that secondary oocyte is being produced, or what time secondary oocyte is produced. Now in second video we shall learn about that remaining part of the tertiary follicle is from the corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum is begin to produce, corpus luteum is begin to produce. So here this remaining part of this tertiary follicle, that is developed Graafian follicle, get converted into this structure called corpus luteum. So here corpus luteum, which begin to produce progesterone. What it begin to produce? Progesterone. Now this progesterone is also known as maternal hormone. So as it prepare uterus for anticipated pregnancy, as it keeps silence after fertilization, progesterone also stimulate and help in implantation of that zygote, as well as silencing of uterus after fertilization. That we shall learn in detail, hormonal control over reproduction. So as a part of video, what happened with that remaining part of the developing Graafian follicle is that corpus luteum is produced, that corpus luteum begin to produce progesterone. And if pregnancy does not occur, this corpus luteum get changed into corpus albicans. It get changed into corpus albicans, and that again we shall discuss in second video. But as a continuity of part of this video, I did explain these 2 points, corpus luteum and corpus albicans. Okay, once again, that it is the process of formation of ova, in which that this oogonial mother cells as a primary follicle arrested in prophase stage, that what remain continue to be after birth, but during puberty most of the primary follicle they degenerated, and 60 to 80,000 primary follicles remain. They undergo process, and from the secondary follicle having 2 layers of granular cells around it, and then again it continued to develop into tertiary follicle. By the time of 14th day, this developed Graafian follicle with antrum is a fluid filled cavity, and externa and theca interna this is externa and this is theca interna. So this is a developed Graafian follicle which undergo breaking, that is undergo ovulation, that release of ovum that we call is a secondary oocyte arrested in metaphase and first polar body. This occur on 14th day with the action of luteinizing hormone, and thus the process of ovulation which completed in ovary, and here also the process of formation of this secondary oocyte in arrested is completed as a part of oogenesis. Now that continue to be in secondary oocyte stage arrested in metaphase into the oviduct at the time of fertilization, that when sperm encounter secondary oocyte undergo meiosis and produce second polar body, and real ovum, that is haploid nucleus, combine with haploid nucleus of sperm to produce diploid called zygote, and then zygote get implanted to continue to have development of pregnancy as part of process of oogenesis. I hope you would have understand. Even if you are having any question, you can ask in comment section or call me on my mobile number so as to have the discussion. I appeal you to like our channel and subscribe it. Also press bell icon so as to receive new videos as and when they are uploaded. Thank you.